Life with an ordinary guy who reincarnated into a total fantasy knockout starts with a 32-year-old salaryman and his hot best friend being drunk in a park, and then they get reincarnated in a fantasy world where they are supposed to defeat the Demon Lord. However, the main character, Tachibana, ends up getting reincarnated into his ideal girl, and the weapon that the goddess allows him to carry is basically his best friend who has like a shit ton of boosted up stats. So they end up mouthing off to the goddess, who just straight up abandons them and lets them sort out how to beat the Demon Lord by themselves, but not before cursing them. As it turns out, the main character is now so hot that it begins to warp everyone's perceptions around him. And more to that point, it also means that his best friend starts to fall in love with him. But his new female body seems to be influencing him, so he starts to fall in love with his best friend. Or they're just gay. It's not clear, and it doesn't matter. So this show is basically an isekai love comedy. And I will say that all of those instances are the weakest parts about this. The isekai elements are okay. It doesn't do anything super interesting with it, but I guess it also technically wouldn't work if it wasn't an isekai, just because there would be no real justification for the gender bender aspect. But it's not a particularly interesting or engaging fantasy series as far as like the fantastical elements work out. The action isn't particularly interesting or engaging. There isn't any like cool powers or necessarily exciting combat scenes. The comedy is very tame and not particularly punchy. It is funny and it does get funnier towards the end of the show, but it doesn't necessarily manage to keep you rolling on the floor laughing the entire time. As for the romantic elements, they're not necessarily the best handled. There is some romantic tension, but the majority of it in the show is just like two characters finding each other hot, and you only get into more subtle romance aspects sort of towards the tail end. There's definitely some implications. I'm not going to say they don't do anything with it. I'm just going to say it's not the most well handled or well explored. I will say, towards the end of the show, there is a scene where the best friend is complimenting our main heroine and going in depth with it for like 3 minutes, and it is an absolutely great scene. Just as far as like two characters interacting is concerned, which, speaking of, there is a great character in this whose appearance is very clearly based off of Kirito and is used as a stand-in as a regular generic isekai protagonist, in that he is also an isekai character with a magic sword. And what I appreciate about him is when you see this sort of parody, like Konosuma does it, the idea is that the other character is basically a huge laughingstock, whereas the guy is consistently useful, and unquestionably, this is the most well-adjusted character in the entire show, including the deities and the villains and the main characters, and he's actually kind of a delight. In fact, I will say that the best part about this show is the characters. They're energetic, they're engaging, they have flaws, but also they have things to appreciate about them. They're very well rounded, and they bounce off of each other very well. The best thing about this show is the characters are very likable. The problem with the show is that they're not doing anything interesting. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye-bye.